You are listening to Level Up Your Gaming Podcast, episode 107, Being Menacing Without a Monologue. In today's episode, we talk about how to make your villains menacing. We discuss what makes a good villain. We also discuss how to add impact to your villains, putting weight behind their actions and avoiding the need for words. If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribe and we'll ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast. My name is Aaron, and joining me virtually on his phone, Jared. How you doing today, Jared?
I am perfectly in the mindset for our topic for today.
We just got started here. I know that you're not having the greatest of weeks, but I
am not.
I appreciate you being a strong trooper for us and our listeners, and you are doing yeoman's work, and we do appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, I'm perfectly in the mindset for our topic today. What is our topic, Aaron?
Our topic is being menacing without a monologue. So it's going to be a podcast on villains again. And,
villains, just perfect. Let's talk about destroying the world.
Yes. It actually kind of works. It fits well with maybe your mood at the moment. But
it fits perfectly.
The idea is, over the years, we've sort of evolved our game to kind of walking away from this idea of a monologue. When you go into games and stuff, there's always a villain doing a monologue. I was just playing, Elden Ring recently, and a couple of the main bosses give out pretty, menacing monologues about different things. And, I'm just like, you know what? In a role-playing game that just doesn't work because you're dealing with players on the other end. You're not reading a novel or you're not watching a show, and you've got players on the other end going, well, he's pontificating, I could kill him.
And so, to give our listeners a little history, we actually had a rule. I'm not sure we've ever told our listeners about the rule we used to have, because I used to do villainous monologues all the time. And literally, I forget who was the first one to do it. I think it might have been you or Brian or Nick. I forget the first one, but literally, I'm entering this villainous monologue, and one of you guys was like, I shoot him. And I was like, what? And he's like, while he's talking, I shoot him. And I was like, I mean, yeah, it's perfectly legitimate as a move, and dare I say, tactically smart. But so literally, we had to institute this rule in our gaming group that I would have to announce I am entering a monologue, and my players, would announce their actions, saying like, okay, but when he's done, I'm shooting him in the head. It kind of inhibited me from being a jerk and being like, well, as soon as he finishes his monologue, he puts up his shield. Like, I would have shot him during the monologue if you let me, And I know there's going to be a lot of storytellers out there who's like, well, you should have had him have a shield. And this is something we've discussed in previous podcasts about: don't expose your villain until you're ready for them to die. That's because your heroes they're gonna engage that threat, and they're gonna go ahead and neutralize that threat as soon as possible. And that it's the smart play. But beyond just monologues, how do you make your villains villainous? You might go, man, look into movies and stuff like that. And actually, even movies is difficult. Let's take, for example, one of my favorite villains, the Joker from Dark Knight. He makes a lot of speeches in that movie, right? I mean, just think about how many speeches he makes. Aaron's video game, where the villains are making monologues, they make a lot of speeches, and it's used by writers a lot to use narrative to explain that I'm a bad dude, or here are my world views. And how do you do it without using just straight up narrative instruction? Here's my villainous plan, and I'm always driven back to an old writing quote, which is, "Show me, don't tell me." And I think it's very applicable in this situation. How do I show my villain? Let's use the Joker for an example. Extremely chaotic, agnostic in his means of attack.
Very sociopathic.
Very sociopathic. I mean, it requires a lot of forethought, and it requires you developing detailed actions for your villain, planning out their moves, and having their moves make sense to a modus operandi. Right? We all hear in television shows, and for the people who don't know what that means, modus operandi, we all hear in police shows, they go, "That's not his MO," right? Which means that's not his modus operandi, or his the way he does things. A cat burglar who leaves, I don't know, a cat figurine at every one of his crime scenes, that's part of his modus operandi. It's part of what he does and how he does it. Or uses lock-picking tools, for example, and these are subtle hints you can give to your players about what they're about to encounter. Let's take a thief, for example. This thief constantly uses lock-picking tools, right? Sneaks in with nobody inside hearing, guards never raise the alarm, in and out, vanishes like a dream. What this tells me is, in combat, he's not looking to engage in a fight, right? He's not looking to get into a scrap with me. Now, it's incumbent on me as the storyteller to remember this. It's very incumbent on me to remember this, because a lot of times we have our villains, they have these wonderful plans and trickery and yada yada, and they hide behind layers of lieutenants, and then once they meet the good guys, they're like, "All right, we're gonna finish this once and for all right here." And it's a very classic, literary and movie methodology. They're like, "We're gonna settle this one-on-one," even though the entire movie they've been sending people to kill this person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the modus operandi goes right up the wall, or right out the window. Right out the wall. What's that?
It's a very strong modus operandi.
Very strong. Goes right through walls. That's a 50 caliber modus operandi right there. And we've used it. And I've even been subject to it. The villain's all dastardly and cunning and stuff like that, and then the players finally get into his secret lair, and he doesn't try to run. He doesn't try to flee and escape. No, he decides to bang it out right there. From one of my favorite movies, The Town, they decide to hold court right there on the street. And they engage, and we forget the modus operandi. So the modus operandi is a way of developing or telling your players about your villain without even talking to them, right? So we had that lock-picking example. You know, he doesn't like to fight. He's crafty. He's intelligent. He uses fine tools to get in there, right? As comparatively to someone, you know, what do? They kick in the door. They kill all the guards. They tend to kill, you know, the homeowners as well, and then they just rip the safe out of the wall and you know, put it in the back of a wagon and take off. Okay, this is a guy, when we meet him, he's probably going to bang it out with us. Clearly, he's not afraid of combat. He actually wants to, and, you know, because they're simpler, and you even take it to the point of, you know, there was a way to get in, you know, undetected. Oh, this guy could have waltzed in from the front door, taken all the fine jewelry and walked out, but instead he goes upstairs and kills the homeowners in their bedroom. He ain't there for the money. He's there for, well, he is, but he's there also for the blood, for the thrill, you know. And this to me is a scary villain. You know, for me, when I hear this guy stayed around just to do that and then took stuff, you know, okay, what's going on with this? So the modus operandi is really good. And it's showing through action rather than narrative or dialogue, you know. And it's not to say that your villain can't communicate with the players. There are historically some of the worst figures in history, some of the worst serial killers were known to communicate with the police. You look at the Zodiac killer. He taunted the police. You know, my brother's personal favorite, Jack the Ripper, and his infamous From Hell letter. And that does bring, you know, some realism to the idea of my villain communicates with the players and this is how he does it. You know, but so, you know, really making that the actions villainous is something really very important, because going beyond modus operandi, if we go a little bit further and say, how do I make my villain menacing? How do I make them something afraid, something to be feared, something to be terrifying? You know, one, going after innocence is always something menacing, but I'm tempted almost to jump into a conversation about what are really villainous things. But you know what? Go through a history book. You know, anything that you find personally appalling is a tendency to will probably make your players personally appalled by this villain's actions. But here's the other thing: make them lethal. That is something that we so often forget as storytellers. We love to taunt our players with our infamous ways and stuff like that, but really doing some damage to our players. You know, Aaron and I talked about in a podcast not too long ago about say the players enjoy you know, they love to get together after their adventures at a local tavern, and somebody kidnaps the tavern bartender and scoops her away. It's somebody that players are personally connected to, somebody they enjoy gaming, you know, not gaming, but working with and communicating to and socializing with. It's an NPC that they've gotten dear to them. Yeah, go after that. Clip her. Go for the personal button. You know what I mean? One of my personal favorites, you know, leave a bomb. Nothing says, I'm trying to kill you and I know you're on to you, than leaving a bomb behind. And nothing says personal like third-degree burns. And these things have to have lasting effects. So many of us will be like, you take 5 hit points of damage, or you take 25. I don't know, you know, D&D levels. You really need to focus on those health levels and the effect. I'm not sure if there's anything in there, hopefully can jump in here and kind of assist me. I'm not sure if there's anything in D&D about like, oh, you lose 25 hit points, you've got a scar, which can lead to penalties for a long duration of time.
I was going to say, if there isn't, then, perhaps give your players a permanent wound. Give them a reminder that they encountered the villain in some fashion. That's one of those things that always makes a villain more menacing. Again, Jared's right with the lethality there. The willingness to kill, the willingness to harm the players, the willingness to harm people who get in the way to harm the players or get in the way that you would harm to accomplish your goal. Those are things that if your players are playing in the direction of leaning into heroes or maybe more, middle of the road, sometimes they're heroes, sometimes they're anti-heroes, your players are going to see these actions and they're going to be like, we have to probably stop this. And you want them to feel like at every turn there's always a bad point, with that villain. And like Jared's right, if you put like a bomb or you have an encounter, you don't necessarily have to have that encounter end with the death of the players. The villain could leave because the accomplishment could be completed. And again, be very careful. We've always warned about introducing your villain too early, because once you introduce them, your players will have motivation to dispatch the villain or apprehend the villain or get rid of the villain in some way, shape, or form. If you are able to enact an encounter in a way that works in your favor, the villain could accomplish their goal, leaving the players permanently wounded or permanently wounding something else within the players, like their pride. That's never a bad way to make a villain feel more intimidating or more menacing. That isn't to say that you should totally ramp up the power of your villain in that first encounter to ensure that the villain humiliates your players. But you could definitely just hope that the villain is maybe appropriately leveled above your players, that they are able to wound the players, injure the players, accomplish their goal, and leave the players going, damn it, we couldn't do anything, we must do more. And then, or you're always one step behind the villain, until you finally catch up to the villain. There's a lot of those kind of back and forth things that you can do. Jared's right with the Joker and the Dark Knight Rises. In that movie, he's always like one step ahead of Batman until Batman's ready to burn down the entire city
to get to him. And exactly. And that was something that was, you could character analyze the Dark Knight Joker forever. I mean, like, I'm pretty sure you could write a book on it. I know there are at least hour-long YouTube videos psychologically analyzing and trying to discover more about the character. But but Aaron brought up a good point, that it's lethality that's got to last. It's got to have an effect. Because here's my thing: at the end of a battle, if your character's left bleeding, bloodied, and wounded, the next session I'm back up to 100 health or 500 health. I've got no scars, no nicks, no dings. Was the battle actually that challenging? Was the battle really that dangerous? Is that villain really that lethal if they're not leaving scars? And that, and just as Aaron said, it's not to, you're not ramping up your villain to extraordinary levels, because that's just in that first encounter, just to humiliate them or whatever. You need an actual villain that actually meets the needs of your players. You can't just artificially ramp them up here and then bring them down there. You do that artificial revving, trust me, players will notice, they'll see. Aaron's right, you need to appropriately level your villain that that at the beginning they're going to be a challenge, and at the end they're going to be a challenge. And the way to do that is to grow them with experience, the same amount of experience perhaps your players get. Maybe they get a little more every night, you know, because they're out doing their wicked plans, and apparently wicked plans give more experience than good plans.
You could do it two ways. I mean, you could have them be where the villain is just out of reach, so the players have something to strive for in the next couple of sessions to know that perhaps we could best the villain. Or, but again, it's a very dangerous situation to be in because the players could just get lucky and kill your villain.
True.
But the other side of this is, you know, you could do something where, the villain is always like I said, the one step ahead of the players. The villain is outsmarting the players because the villain is, you know, planning, and you have not yet caught up to the plans and the motivations of the villain. I like the way that Jared says, you know, the permanent wound, it doesn't necessarily need to be against the player in terms of the lasting lethality against the player, but it could be that, you know, it's the permanent wound of you are now taking things that the players care about. You know, they'd be NPCs, pieces of their backstory, things like that, or you
equipment.
Or equipment. The equipment is a great one. You talked about that in a previous podcast, but you got to be, like I said, you got to be careful about it. The other one too is that, like, you know, in D&D, perhaps because the healing aspect of it is really ramped up, you could say that the villain leaves you with a permanent curse, and until you dispatch of the villain, you are always cursed, and that curse could have physical ailments that reside amongst it, meaning that your rule set is built around you must eventually dispatch the villain, or the curse eats away at you and kills you. So, like, there's always motivation to get to the villain and dispatch the villain, or undo the curse. I mean, there's obviously multiple angles you could kind of go with that. But also you can then have it be like, you know, where maybe the players aren't first touched by that curse, but instead the villain is leaving the curse everywhere he goes. So you are now encountering people who are dying slowly, and you are watching this death and destruction everywhere you go. And eventually, if the players do not hone in on it, then you could have the villain, you know, encounter the players and curse the players, and then force the players into the situation. There's a lot of ways that you can sort of coax the players into moving that direction of the villain, and then everything is menacing. Like, again, it's that kind of death and destruction, and the lethality part of it being that I don't spare anybody any mercy as I kind of move through my plan and I enact my plans. That's the thing that's always really scary on the other side of it. I mean, if you have like a, you know, villain that's not vocal, something that you put into a one shot, something that feels, you know, inhuman and is just kind of doing things, you know, indiscriminately, and you don't really understand why they're doing it, like typically without a motivation. You know, who could be next, and, you know, like, you know, what's happening here, and like, why are these people, why is this thing exist in this world? Those are ways that you can have something be lesser forms of menacing. But I mean, the real menacing piece of it is, you know, they're doing things that are impactful to you in the world, okay, and they continue to do them, and the more they do them, the worse the world is around you, thus making it so, like, without a monologue, you know that you must get rid of the villain because these things are happening all around you.
And Aaron brings up an excellent point right there in one word, very succinctly: impact. Here's the thing: I can hear about the things, you know, done by horrible people, but without impact to myself personally, it is hard to evoke emotion. It's not impossible. Let's take you know, current event situations right now. I very much feel for the people in Ukraine. I empathize with them. When I see the photographs, it's sad. You know, you need to really paint that picture if you're going to use community effect. He is affecting the community in this way. You really need to work hard to paint that picture. And that brings me to my next point. Let your victims be the messengers. Okay? Let them who are if you can't punch the players, right? I can't hit them directly, leave a scar, leave a curse. If I can't hurt someone who's personally attributed to them, right? I have to make someone be personally attributed to them. I have to develop that very quickly. So, I one of the movies that I absolutely hate. I hate the whole series. It's called Saw. I think everyone's heard of it. I can't stand these movies, right? I can't. But the thing is, the police always get there right before the victim dies sometimes. And they got to hear the quivering of the voice. They've got to see the terrified look in the victim's eyes. They got to hear their pleas and their begs. These are the things that make, nightmares. And that, it depends on the villain are you going with. Always be like, my villain here is a thief. It's supposed to be a villain, but like, we're not talking about nightmares. We're talking about like, dang, I hope we get this guy next time. And then there are nightmares. And then you create nightmares. And nightmares for me is what, ironically, I always aim for. But that's because I really enjoy writing horror. I want my players to be afraid of the dark when they leave my house, or when they turn off the lights. So when you go with that, let victims be the messengers sometimes, whether or not that is in word. The players arrive and talk with witnesses what happened. You have to work very hard on describing that. The soulless look in his eyes. Not just his eyes were black, the soulless look in his eyes. The human monster. He cut down our greatest warriors, like that. Put some fear in there, use the victims. And sometimes it's not just going to be a witness, it's going to be an actual victim. Go with the emotive thing. Villains, if you're truly making villains, right? There's something about seeing corpses. It's very interesting. There's something about seeing corpses, or storytelling corpses. Corpses are scary, and I'm going to get into that in just a few moments. Seeing people with one arm, or a farmer who's lost both his hands, what does that affect? Sometimes the person doesn't have to be killed to be ravaged by this individual. Dark Ages, D&D, it's so easy to upset an entire community on such an epic level. Burning crops, I think every D&D storyteller has probably said, you come upon the village and the village has been lit on fire and the people are weeping. Dive into the emotion of that moment. Embrace that emotion and write it out. It's not just they're weeping, they've lost everything. It will take years for them to rebuild. Have the witness go, how will I feed my children? And it's because that's what it is in the Dark Ages. You burn a field of crops, that community is probably not going to survive winter. There's a high likelihood people will feel this pain years down the road. And yeah, you're if you've got heroes with heartless heroes, they're going to be like, oh, go to the town down the road. I have no money. Do the players dig into their pockets? Is that how you hit them, with their gold? That's a question you need to ask yourself. What do my players see as important? And that's going back. Let that emotive communication happen through the victims. You can also do this not only with witnesses and victims, you can also do it with corpses. Corpses are they taking their time? You know, are they rushing through it? Is it just one body onto the next? Is it different swords? Do they have a gang? You know, what are these things that can be telling of the villain? Are they taking their time? Are they are these deep gashes when they hit with an axe? Is it because they have a plus 15 modifier? I don't know how it goes in D&D. Is it a plus 15 modifier? So when they hit them with an axe, it almost cleaved them in half. One swing of an axe. This is clean. There was no sawing. You know, these are questions that when you're putting together that message, that monologue, right? This is your monologue. Don't spend time having a villain stand on a lofty dais being like, look at all I've done. No, let them show you what I have done. Let my actions be the villainous part. You know, and that is really making a message more than any. Trust me, I will tell you, it is more than any lofty speech. When you make it personal and you make those messages very clear through their actions, and when you target those actions specifically at things that you know will make the players emote, or you work hard to make them emote or empathize with, that's really going to be so much more time. And you know, I mean, you might say like, hey, for a quick villain, it is. I needed 2 nights stress. We're not saying to do this for every single villain that you make. Save these for the ones that are. Sorry, I had to snap at my cats. They're being a little rowdy. Save it for the truly terrible villains, or even the villains that you want to have an impact, to last. Something that they talk about not at night 4, but at night 43. Man, that barbarian. Do you remember him? You know, that's what you're aiming for. If you're just aiming for toss-away villains, you can make toss-away villains. That's no problem. But I ask that you listen, Aaron. It's the impact. What kind of impact is your villain making? What messages is he making with his actions? And really, that will certainly become clear, and you don't have to worry about, I am making a monologue, I shoot him in the head. No, I mean, when they go up against that villain, it should be the culmination of a point, you know? It should be the climbing of a mountain. We've succeeded and finally gotten to the point. And whether or not that point is they turn around and they're arrested, make sure when you end that villain, you know, if you want to make him truly menacing, you know, have that villain when he's getting arrested say, I burned crops. They won't repair this region for 50 years. There'll still be children who cry about my name because their parents starved to death when I burned their crops. And it can be something so simple as that. A truly terrifying villain, that's a terrifying villain to me. Someone who's going around village after village burning crops because he wants the peasantry to die because they disobeyed him. Maybe it's a count, duke, an earl. You know, and he is burned. Well, that would cut into his income, but you know, think that one out. maybe it's the sheriff of the region who doesn't think about the income. You know, these people spit at me. I was once a community member, respected community member, and then they spit at me when my count asked me to be the sheriff, or shire reeve if you prefer the medieval terms. And because I collected taxes, they spit on me, so I burned their crops. You know, and they'll remember me for 50 years. They'll remember me. The count will remember my name. And that is a monstrous villain, one who gave a message, you know, and because you can even save that monologue to after the arrest. They don't have to say it before. A lot of people talk after the arrest. That's where we get confessions from. And police, they want to talk about their actions. Look at some of the most famous serial killers. You get them in the room after they've been arrested, they can't shut up about what they've done because they want to be remembered. How do you make your villain remembered? And it's because of the messages that they brought. It's because of how you made your characters empathize with their victims. That's truly what's going to be the most impactful. That was a bit of a train I went on.
No, I think it's a good. I think that succinctly sort of ties up the points that we were trying to make. I mean, I think it's beautifully said. I mean, do you have anything else that you want to add to this?
No, it was such a good note to end on, but I'm not going to stop. Another thing about how to communicate villains, right, without monologues is an idea. So often in D&D storytelling, White Wolf storytelling, hell, you could even put it into Star Wars and Firefly, all these systems. You can put in, we deal with cults a lot. I think in every system, cults are I
feel like if you haven't dabbled in a cult, you probably probably haven't been playing long enough. So
if you haven't come up against a cult or story told a cult, you haven't been playing that long. Cults are fantastic, but something that's scary to me, as somebody who's studied recent military history, specifically focusing on the global war on terror. One part of that is to study the enemy, to study Al Qaeda and the Taliban. So pervasive is that idea, right? And that's what it starts off with an idea. I hate to rip off of Inception there, ideas can grow and can completely change people. You take the idea of freedom from the West. These things can be terrifying. When you capture the lieutenant, of the villain, is he spouting the rhetoric? Does he truly believe what he is doing is right? If he even breaking away from extremism in religion, look at the Italian mafia. It was this thing of ours, La Cosa Nostra. The mafia was able to make it, this is part of our community. This is part of our society. This is part of our heritage. It's in our blood. And I mean, because you got to look at the guys at the bottom. They're not making that much. They're not making millions of dollars a year. It's the mid-levels and the upper levels. They're the ones making money. But how do you get, some thug? Oh, well, we'll make you rich, or we'll help you with that. Does it come out of poverty? And we've discussed that before, motives and how to, in building a better villain, we talk about creating a motive. It's huge. Why am I villainous? What was the point where I turned? Essentially the mafia used good times. This is part of your heritage. It's this thing of ours, and we're going to show you a good time. Every time you hang out with us, you never pay for a drink. You'll have steak and lobster. Yeah, you live in a shithole. Yeah. But when you're out with us, you are king. You're a freaking king. And you're a member of us. You're a mafia. You're something that's been around for debated history. Some people say Napoleon. But there's a lot of debate with that. So the idea sometimes can be used as the message, especially in terms of henchmen. Henchmen can be used to spread the message of the narrative of your villain. Are they, do they do it for the wealth? Are they doing it because this is the natural evolution of man, war? that's an idea I've played with in the end, because if you actually look at war, it has changed the evolutionary course of mankind. Rome, developed half the freaking world, right? Roads, thanks to the Romans in Europe, but they did it through conquering. Very seldom were they just walking up to people and being like, "Hey, you want to be part of Rome?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure." But even their soldiers, you're cold, you're wet, you get okay meals. You're doing it for the light of Rome. You're doing it for your country, right? There's a positive motivation behind it. Watch Gladiator. Gladiator in the first in the scene with the lead character, Marcus Aurelius. He says Rome is the light. Is that what is that the idea that's culminating? What is it in the cult that they think they're bringing through their terrible actions? What message are they trying to speak? Is it part of something bigger? And we've all done if you've story told cults, it's always been like, oh, we're bringing together this great ritual. We need, a village full of bodies. That's in the ritual. Not sure who wrote that part. Even if somebody told me, we're like, one of the things that I always have trouble with is, we're going to raise a demon, right? I've always had trouble with that. How many followers are going to be like, oh, the demon, you say? This is going to be awesome. He's totally going to give us the goods. He's just going to, the scalper of heads and, murderer of trees, he's going to be cool with me because I helped raise him from the untold. No, like you go to any historical cults, read more about cults and how they actually do it. You know what I mean? They separate you from your family. They tell you you're their family, and almost always there's a positive message behind it. Very few people just chase after the negative message. If you actually break down the word thug, it comes from like this group called the Thuggee cults or something like that out of India, who are worshippers of Shiva. Okay, they worshiped a dark god, but I am assuming that's a very small, very, very small group of people. But to be raised in that heritage, to know nothing else than the worship of destruction, that's scary to me. That's terrifying. That's a message. There's a messenger. Not only are they going to do it through their actions, but if anyone's caught, they're going to spread that message. We do this for Shiva, and they're so emboldened into it. And you can even go with lighter mafia. They're most of them were not so emboldened by it that they didn't just turn on each other whenever they got caught. That's how the mafia essentially died in New York. How it essentially died here in Chicago. We were the city of Al Capone, for God's sakes. Now, just a couple of years ago, they rounded up like half of the mafia in one sweep. Essentially, you have mafia bosses acting like they've gone demented just to try to keep from going to jail. So you have those varying degrees of commitment, but commitment to cause and the message that cause spreads and how they spread it. Another hated movie, Chronicles of Riddick, I think it is. It's the second one. It's after Pitch Black. Aaron, help me out here.
That's the one, yeah. Chronicles of Riddick.
Okay, where they're like, convert or die. Not a great recruiting strategy. Yes, people are going to convert, but they're probably going to be looking for a way out. They know they're safe. Go deeper into it. Look into that. Look into that. It's going to end you up on a couple of FBI reading lists. When you look up like how does a cult work, or how do people join cults. But it's illuminating and brings authenticity. One of the things that our modern society brings is a lot of Facebook, and people get tied up into ideas just off of Facebook posts, and the promises and allure. Sometimes money is enough. Look at influencers. It's sickening how, not sickening, I should say it's human, how easily we're wrapped up into certain things. And let those people be the messengers, but make sure you're examining what message they're sending and how they're sending it. Do those practitioners follow the same way as the ultimate villain? Do those henchmen do things just like he does, meticulously and slow? Is it fast and brutal? Do they leave messages? Do they leave personality in their messages? So looking into those. I think this was an appropriately dark episode. How about you?
Indeed it was.
Into the twisted mind of Jared.
Do you have anything else you want to add, Jared?
No, go out there, the villains. Just remember, never exceed the comfort level of your players, never exceed the comfort level of yourself. Especially when you're diving into the deep, dark history of like cults and stuff like that. And, just
exactly.
remember those rules and
explore inward and know where your boundaries are and know where your players' boundaries are.
Know where your players' boundaries are. So that's an especially important one, but also remember where your boundaries are. If you don't like some reading well stuff, put it down. Yeah. That's it. That's my thing.
Well, if you have some ways that you like to make your villains menacing that are not monologues themselves, or maybe you have particularly good ways of being able to deliver monologues that your players don't just immediately try to kill your villain in the middle of the monologue.
I would love to hear that one.
I would love to hear that as well. Or maybe you had a very memorable villain that you wanted to share, and how did you make them menacing? Go ahead and let us know. levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. We'd be happy to hear from you. Also, we are on YouTube, so
smash that like button.
Nice. And then go ahead and review the podcast, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Go back and listen to the other episodes or share with a friend. We do appreciate it. But that's going to wrap us up for the week. So for Jared, I'm Aaron. Have a great week, everyone.
Have a great week, everyone.